Losing hair during fasting isn't a side effect, it's a message. Your body isn't sabotaging you. It's telling you a truth most fasting protocols never mention. When energy is scarce, the body acts like a highly efficient crisis manager. At a molecular level, it decides what stays and what can wait. And guess what goes on the waiting list first? Exactly, your hair. Not because it doesn't matter, but because, for your metabolism, breathing and pumping blood are urgent. Beautiful hair isn't. What looks like a hair loss problem is actually your body communicating with biological precision. And when you understand what it's saying, everything changes, including how you fast. Let me show you what happens internally. When you fast, your body reduces the supply of circulating glucose and starts managing energy with much more discretion. It's like a company cutting costs. Essential departments continue operating normally. Those considered non-essential receive less funding, and sometimes none at all. The hair follicle falls exactly into this second category. And ironically, the hair bald is one of the fastest cell-dividing tissues in the human body. To produce a single strand, it needs a continuous and stable supply of amino acids, iron, zinc, biotin, and energy. Not periodically, constantly. When fasting is too prolonged, too restricted, or poorly structured, this supply falters. The follicle senses the scarcity, enters a pause mode, and the strand stops growing. Weeks later, it falls out. Metabels, we frequently see this pattern. A woman starts fasting enthusiastically, sees results on the scale in the first few months, and then notices her hair is thinner, weaker, and more in the drain than it should be. But physiology has an explanation, and what has an explanation has a solution. Now we're going to understand exactly which nutrients fasting compromises first, and why hair feels it before skin, nails, or any other visible sign. So let's talk about nutrients. Specifically, the 3 that poorly managed fasting compromises first, and that your hair feels before any test shows: iron, zinc, and protein. It seems simple, but the mechanism is sophisticated. Hair is made of keratin, a structural protein that needs to be continuously synthesized by the follicle. For this to happen, the body needs available amino acids, iron to transport oxygen to the bulb cells, and zinc to regulate the enzymes that control hair growth. Remove any of these 3 from the equation, and the follicle cannot complete its cycle. In 2017, researchers Emily Guo and Rajani Katta published a review that became famous in dermatology: Diet and Hair Loss, Effects of Nutrient Deficiency and Antioxidant Use. What they documented was straightforward. Severe caloric restriction mimics a condition called acute telogen effluvium. Simply put, metabolic stress forces an abnormal number of follicles to enter the resting phase at the same time. The result appears 8 to 12 weeks later, exactly when you're feeling good about fasting and think you're on the right track. It's a cruel delay, but I'll explain that better shortly. And here's the point almost no one talks about. You don't need to be severely malnourished for this to happen. A prolonged period of insufficient protein or bioavailable iron supply is enough, something very common in long fasts without adequate nutritional planning. If you're tired of trying crazy internet hair tips that never yield real results, this channel is your place. Subscribe and stay with me, because what we do here is exactly that. Take real science, translate it without fluff, and show you what to adjust without giving up what's working. And speaking of adjustments, now that you understand what fasting can compromise, the important question is, can you protect your hair without abandoning the protocol? The answer is yes, and it starts by understanding how the body distributes the nutrients it receives. This is where biology gets brutally honest with us. Your body was programmed to survive, not to look beautiful. And when resources are scarce, it executes a hierarchy backed by thousands of years of evolution. There's no negotiation, no exception. At the top of the list, brain, heart, liver, kidneys. These organs always receive energy and nutrients in a priority flow. Below them, immune system, hormonal balance, muscle repair. Even further down, almost at the end of the line, hair, nails, and skin. Not because your body doesn't care about your aesthetics, but because, from an evolutionary standpoint, none of these structures are necessary to stay alive tomorrow. The technical name for this is preferential nutrient allocation. In practice, it means that in any scenario of scarcity, whether a long fast or a diet with insufficient protein, The body diverts resources from secondary functions to keep vital functions operating. It's efficient, it's intelligent, and it's completely indifferent to what you'll see in the mirror. And that's where the pain appears in a different way. You try to make peace with the mirror, but you only feel frustration. You're putting in the effort, cutting calories, respecting your eating window, trying to do everything right, and the return you get is weaker hair, duller skin, a version of yourself that doesn't represent the effort you're putting in. This isn't being overly sensitive, it's biochemistry at work. The body is fulfilling its programming. The problem is that this programming was written at a time when survival was the only goal. Today, you want more than to survive. You want to feel good, whole, beautiful inside and out. And that's completely possible. It just requires you to understand the rules of the game to play it to your advantage. And the first rule is, don't fight the hierarchy. Learn to feed it strategically. How? That's exactly what we're going to break down now. Let's dive a little deeper into biology, because here's the mechanism that explains everything. Each strand of your hair lives in a cycle. There's the anagen phase, which is active growth and can last 2 to 6 years. There's the catagen phase, a short transition. And there's the telogen phase, which is rest, when the strand stops growing and eventually falls out. Under normal conditions, about 85 to 90% of your follicles are in the growth phase at the same time. The rest are resting. It's a rotating, silent, balanced system. Now introduce significant metabolic stress, such as a prolonged, poorly planned fast with a consistent caloric and protein deficit. What happens? The body interprets this stress as a threat signal, and in response, it pushes an abnormal number of follicles into the telogen phase all at once. It's a kind of emergency brake on hair growth, the body redirecting energy to where it considers it most urgent. This phenomenon has a name, the one I mentioned before, telogen effluvium. And the detail that most surprises women is the timing. The stress happens now. The shedding appears 2-3 months from now. When the strands start falling out, the cause is already long past, invisible, silent, forgotten. And the most important point? The problem isn't fasting. It's fasting without adequate nutritional structure to sustain tissues that depend on a continuous supply. The difference between the two is exactly what separates a protocol that transforms from a protocol that exacts a price you shouldn't have to pay. And that difference starts with very specific choices, which we'll see now. So we've reached the practical part, and this is where most protocols fail, not in the fasting itself, but in what happens when the window opens. Because many people break their fast with a fruit, a light yogurt, any snack, and then wonder why their body isn't responding. The hair follicle doesn't work with volume. It works with specific raw materials. And if those raw materials don't arrive, it simply doesn't produce. So what does it need? First, high biological value protein. Hair is keratin. Keratin is protein. Without essential amino acids, especially lysine, cysteine, and methionine, the follicle has nothing to use. Eggs, meats, fish, and whole dairy products are a priority here, not an option. Second, bioavailable iron. And pay attention to this detail. Iron from animal sources has significantly higher absorption than plant-based iron. If you're fasting and still eat little red meat, the math doesn't add up. Combining animal sources with vitamin C in the same meal enhances absorption. Third, healthy fats. The scalp needs essential fatty acids to maintain a functional follicular environment. Olive oil, avocado, nuts, sardines, whole eggs, it's not a luxury, it's infrastructure. And finally, zinc and biotin. Not as an isolated supplement taken at the end of the day, but within a meal that already provides the right metabolic context for absorption. The eating window isn't just when you eat, it's when your body rebuilds. And what you put into that window directly determines what appears or disappears in your mirror weeks later. That said, there's still a structural adjustment to the fasting protocol itself that makes all the difference. And that's what we're going to talk about. Now let's turn all of this into real decisions. Because understanding physiology is the first step, but what moves the needle is practical adjustment. The first adjustment is to the protocol itself. If you're doing long fasts every day for 18-20 hours and notice signs of hair weakening, your body is asking for a pause in intensity, not in fasting. Reducing the frequency, alternating days with more generous windows, or simply shortening the restriction period a few days a week already significantly reduces metabolic stress. The second adjustment is to electrolytes. During fasting, sodium, magnesium, and potassium levels drop, and this directly affects the cellular environment where the follicle operates. Simple replenishment, without overdoing it, makes a real difference. The third is hydrolyzed collagen. Not as a miracle, but as a resource. Taken when breaking the fast, along with vitamin C, it offers keratin precursor amino acids exactly when the follicle is most receptive. If you feel like you're doing everything right, but still haven't seen the expected results, your body might just need a boost. I've left an option in the comments below that does exactly that, intelligently, without overdoing it. And listen to the signs before they scream. Breaking hair, slow growth, thinner strands are early warnings. The body warns before it exacts a price. Now let me tie all of this together and conclude my reasoning. Hair isn't just vanity, it's a thermometer. When it weakens, when it falls out more than it should, when it stops growing, it's reflecting something happening internally, long before any test shows it. And fasting, done intelligently, isn't an enemy of this. It's a powerful source of longevity, metabolic balance, and hormonal control. But like any source, the result depends on how you use it. When you build a truly healthy, consistent routine, your body stops working against you and starts working with you. This is the environment where the body cooperates most, where the follicle has raw materials, where metabolism has rhythm, where the signals make sense. You don't have to choose between losing weight and having hair. You don't have to choose between fasting and aesthetic health. You need to understand the body you have and give it what it needs to deliver what you want. That's exactly what we continue building together here.